Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Terra Stories, which, as you know, is an impact investing series. My name is Paul Savoldelli, and I'm part of the Terra Impact Fund. As you know, in this series, we focus on public and private companies that are using proven, cost-effective, and game-changing sustainable economies to have a substantial impact on the world. Today, we're very pleased to be hosting Tom Corle. Tom is the CEO and founder of New Energy Blue. New Energy Blue is in the process of developing a series of biomass refineries that use a proprietary technology with 29 global patents that Tom and his team, along with Ørsted, which, as you might know, is one of the leading clean energy utilities in the world based in Denmark, that his team and Ørsted developed over the course of 8 years. Very importantly, this is a second generation of biomass refineries because it turns agricultural residues or agricultural waste. Tom doesn't like the fact that I use the term waste, but turns agricultural residues into valuable commodities such as ethanol and lignin, which is a substitute for coal. In terms of our fund, this has a checklist of exactly the types of investments that we would like to make because we can be a catalyst for change. This opportunity has a tremendously successful and experienced management team. It's a very large and scalable market opportunity. The results and the impact of this technology are scalable and measurable, and it has a very large and immediate impact. Tom will get into this, but one of these facilities would sequester more carbon than all the Teslas in the world combined. So this is exactly the type of investment that you want to make because there's an urgency to having an impact on climate change, and you have to do things, in my view, that are market-driven, profitable on their own, even without incentives, which make it very profitable, and which have a tremendous impact immediately. I might also add that this technology has real benefits for the local farming community. It is a second source of income where they can sell their foodstuffs, corn, wheat, etc., to the market, but then can sell some of their biomass residue to the facility. And it also creates a very large number of jobs. And just in the American Midwest, there's enough agricultural residue to build 500 of these facilities. We're not building 500 facilities, but it shows you the scale of the opportunity. And since our fund is focused on the United States and the Americas, you could develop dozens and dozens of these facilities and have a very substantial impact. Very quickly on Tom's background, he knows of what he speaks. He has been in the ethanol business for more than 2 decades, actually since the 1990s. He has a very successful record in the first generation of ethanol, and the problems that he was facing and that the industry was facing in that first generation is exactly what made him focus on a solution and a different path in terms of clean energy, clean transportation fuels. He's also the founder of the Advanced Biofuels Business Council, and other related lobbying groups. So he has a very strong policy background as well, which is important as we navigate this world of impact investing. So with that, I will hand it over to Tom, and thank you for joining us, Tom. Tom will make a quick introduction of New Energy Blue. I will ask some questions, and then we will open it up for questions from the group.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Actually, you did a great presentation. I don't need to present much. Glad to be able to have this time to be able to discuss not just about our technology and the accomplishments that we have done and where we're going, but also where the planet is going right now, and being able to fit well within the new growing carbon economy. And so that's really what we're talking about, and being able to make that impact and discussing this with ESG type of investors interested to be able to not just do well for themselves, but also do well for changing the world right now. And it's been a kind of a strange year for all of us. So certainly New Energy Blue includes a lot more than myself. I have much brighter people than me working on this over the past decade, both in Denmark and here in the US. Our team of process engineers are second to none. They have built the largest facilities in the world on the grain ethanol side, but also looking at food processing, power generation, and everything to do with energy and renewable energy per se. And so our team of engineers, about 19 very smart engineers, been working on this in the US along with Ørsted over the past decade. And where we're going is being able to present something that shows not just healing the climate damage, but also creating a lot of new jobs out of that as well, which through COVID is very, very important, both inside and outside Washington, D.C. right now. So next slide. This is a photograph actually of a storage facility of biomass. This is all wheat straw stored in Denmark, in which we utilized to bring down the carbon footprint, working with Ørsted, co-burning that in their power facilities, but also utilizing this straw to be able to go to higher value products, taking the sugars and the salts and the metals out of biomass so that you have a clean lignin, which is the cellulosic walls, to be able to burn and produce power instead of direct firing biomass. And out of those sugars, we can produce a lot of other material, a lot of other products. That includes biofuels, fuel ethanol, jet fuel, and the like. The USDA a while back did a billion ton study of biomass in the US, and out of that billion tons, we'll be drawing to be able to produce large amounts of fuel. And globally, you know, we're looking at China, which is the second largest producer of corn. We are using those corn stalks. So we'll be bringing in, as Paul said, it's waste. It is classified as waste in some areas. For instance, it's waste if you're going to the bond market to finance these projects. But I call them ag residues. We see nothing as waste. We use everything 100% within our processing units. And so what we've done is we bring a lot of this biomass knowledge from the state of Denmark to the US, and being able to implement that with the farmers. And I'll get a little bit more in detail of that. But you have a lot of American companies and international companies like John Deere, New Holland, International Harvester, all have put a lot of time and billions of dollars invested already around this. And we've been working closely with them to be able to bring in that cleanest biomass into our facilities as we build out here in the US. Next slide. This is a rendering of our one of our facilities that we have modeled. And so basically you're bringing the biomass 3 by 4 by 8 foot bales into the straw barn, as you see out in front there. Everything is mechanically operated. We have cranes that come and can unload each one of those tractor and trailers within about a 6-minute time, and place them and categorize them within the straw barn, and being able to track where those bales come from within a 10-meter square out there in the universe. And so it enables us to be able to be sure we get the appropriate biomass, and we pay for that from the farmers. Most of the farmers are very good at collecting this. It's just that we have a little bit tighter restrictions, and we're already working with the farmers on that, and they're very excited because it's an enormous amount of income from fields that they are not, they're barely scraping profits on now, and so this is their major profit margins on collecting a lot of this biomass right now. Collecting some of this biomass, we see an increase per acreage of revenue back to the farmer, a lot more than we do on the grain ethanol side. That's about 20 cents per bushel. Looking at tonnage, and if you look at the economics, we're able to give somewhere around $1.20 back compared to that 20 cents. So on the same real estate. And so that's huge for the farmer right now, getting additional revenue based on the real estate in which they are practicing on. So we have past this, you have the operated units, you have a reactor that breaks down the sugars and the lignin product. You have two sugars in all biomass, cellulose and hemicellulose, C5 and C6 sugars. And we will be fermenting, and within the fermenters on down, the fermenting tanks you see lined up within those. The rest of the process is pretty much the same as what we've done hundreds of times within the grain ethanol industry. We'll be using a hydrolysis process to be able to activate all those sugars for those fermenters. We have been working with Novozymes and other enzyme suppliers for the past 10 years over in Denmark. Novozymes actually invested their own $30 million into an enzyme production plant down in Nebraska to feed 10 of our facilities here in the US. And so we're working with them very closely on that. And those that see our data room later on can be able to read through some of that. This is the commercial demonstration plant that we built in Denmark. We ran this for 5 years, optimizing the process and optimizing what we're doing today. We are not scaling up on our next facility. We are just duplicating systems, mechanical systems that we've already built and operated within this facility. Certainly break down any type of risk. We've scaled up 10x 3 times in Denmark already, as you can see, from pilot plant to a commercial demonstration facility. Ørsted really invested in this, about $250 million during this time. My team was working with Ørsted all during that time period. We knew how to execute commercial projects. They invested heavily within the R&D and the scale up of this. So they took all that risk off of us to get to this point where we can commercially execute. NEB, about a year ago, we bought the exclusive rights around this technology for the Americas, and also the rights to be able to build and advance this globally. New Energy, or Ørsted, will be protecting our 29 patents and being able to work fluidly going forward. As being able to show the what the economics look like. If you're going to make an impact in climate change, you need to be able to make that profitable as well. So the one thing that we have done, we've been working with Washington, certainly with the new EPA administrations coming on. You know, we are kind of focused on where this carbon story might work. We have done a lot of study within the Midwest, looking at project sites Our mission is to be able to build 5 of these facilities, large facilities, in the US and Canada, looking at the Corn Belt and the wheat straw basin up in Canada, also irrigated wheat basin out in the state of Washington. And so our first project we're looking to do is at Mason City, Iowa. And so Mason City, we have an option on a site. It's right across the road from a 150 million gallon a year grain ethanol operation. We will be connecting into the rail system there, being able to transport our fuel to low carbon fuel to California. And the reason that's so critical is that California pays more on carbons than anybody else in the world right now. And roughly running around $200 a ton for replacements of those fossil carbons. And we're the only technology right now going into that have actually built a demonstration facility and ran it at nameplate capacity that can actually fill that market in a carbon negative capacity. What that means is that grain ethanol scores within a GREET scoring system that California uses to score carbons, about 30% savings of carbon below the baseline of gasoline. We can get as much as 130 to 140% below that baseline of gasoline. So, for instance, if you take a look at power from wind and solar, they can get carbon neutral. We can actually get carbon negative, which is very important as we start looking at our own carbon story, both here in the US, but Europe and other places are actually counting those carbons quite efficiently within the Paris Treaty. And as we get back into the Paris Treaty, we'll be doing the same. So the only way to be able to make a huge impact is to be able to go minus with your carbons within the transportation sector. Electric vehicles can't do that. We can go possibly carbon neutral if all that power is coming from non-fossil fuel production. Where we're at here, you can see our projects. Our projects can show about 50% EBITDA, which is pretty fantastic, giving off a more than a 20%, 25% IRR on our projects. It really depends on how much we spend to reduce that carbon score and get as low as possible, because as carbon pricing increases, we're able to take advantage of that. We have a very flexible way to be able to model these projects and to be able to bring our carbon scores down even more. And with the biomass we bring in, biomass contains water, roughly around 10 to 20% water is contained within the biomass that comes into our facilities. That's our processed water. So we don't use freshwater supplies. We bring that water in from the biomass, and we utilize that within our process and recycle it for steam to be able to process the biomass itself. So we're generating fuel without that freshwater supply within that processing system. We'll be producing 32 to 40 million gallons of ethanol within most of these facilities. A little bit less on the first facility. As I said, we're not scaling up systems. And so we'll be producing a little bit less than that in our first biomass refinery in Iowa. And still being able to generate the nice returns that you're seeing here, just a little bit less of it. about 209,000 tons of lignin pellets. The lignin pellets are cleaner than burning wood pellets. As you know, a lot of countries are focusing on wood pellets, being able to offset their fossil fuel carbons from their coal-fired power stations and gas power stations. And so our lignin actually doesn't have the salts and the metals and the sugars in it that burn and foul up systems. And so it's a very clean product. And that's what Ørsted was trying to do all along. And it took us a while to be able to have that clean process. And we don't use acid and high ammonias as other processes do. And so we have a clean lignin product at the end, and I'll get into all the benefits of that in a further slide here. We'll also be producing some biogas. We use that biogas to generate our own steam to operate the facility. And so we can get completely off the grid with our facilities here. Next slide. This is kind of a complex slide, and I'm sure that most of you want to take another look at it. But the uniqueness about this is you see the lineup of cellulosic ethanol, grain ethanol, biodiesel, utility, solar utility, wind, and renewable natural gas coming from biogas productions. And so all of them are alternative, all of them are renewable, not all of them are sustainable. Grain ethanol certainly has their limits, as you can only use a certain amount of number 2 yellow corn going to livestock feed to produce the ethanol. Even though they do produce the distillers grains, which is high protein back. Biodiesel has constraints as well, looking at fats and soybean. Next level is land use. Grain ethanol, you're taking those food acreage and producing energy. It's always been a land use issue. Biodiesel has the same type of land use issues. Utility, solar and wind are having those same land use issues. You have a lot of environmentalists pushing back now as we're starting to see more real estate being taken up. And the results are long permitting, some of them as much as 5 years to be able to permit some of those projects. In the Midwest, we have relationships with the state of Iowa to start with, and other states that we can, because we are a low emitter, we can permit these projects within about a 6-month period. Longest lead time is usually air permitting. Because we're that low emitter, we're able to accomplish that faster than we did with the grain ethanol explosion. Emissions, we can get to a carbon negative. As I said, solar and wind can get to carbon neutral. Grain ethanol and biodiesel are reducing those carbons about 30 to 40% below that baseline of gasoline. Revenue streams, because we are a refinery system, we have a lot more flexibility. We're just not producing power. We can change with flexible markets to biochemistry, and I'll show you just a little bit of glimpse on the last slide here after this. We also can give back the fertilizer because we collect the nutrients and can give that back to the farmers, as well as the biofuel going into those markets and feeding the low carbon markets here in the US that are looking to be expand. A lot of states are looking to adopt the same model as California has. The whole Northeast corridor, including New York right now, are looking at their own low carbon fuel standard to be able to execute. And we could possibly see a national rollout within carbon, such as Canada did last year, rolling out a very similar low carbon fuel standard across their country, which is about the same market size actually as California. The one thing that we do, we can produce a better return, and that's where we have a lot of interest within the debt and equity on our projects right now, simply because we also bring a guarantee to our debt from the state of Denmark around our projects. And solar and wind right now are very strained on those returns, and that's why we're all of a sudden getting that attention from these large funds. We do have a mandate letter which we can share from several debt interest, including Goldman Sachs, that we have a long-term relationship with, who also came in and bought shares in Ørsted a few years back. Job creation, we create more jobs. About 100 jobs are created at each facility, high-paying jobs. Construction jobs on these last about 24 months, 400 to 500 construction jobs are created during that time. And so you can really see the balance and the opportunity here of not just creating a low carbon product, but also creating a green collar economy and making strong impacts within those given areas in which we put these facilities. Last slide. What this shows here is being able to show feedstocks. We have actually done several engineering packages already around grain straw, mainly wheat straw, but it also can be rice straw and others. Barley straw, which is very good because it increases cover crop. Corn stover, which is the corn stalks and leaves bringing in that we will bale. Sugar bagasse, that's all the stems and the leaves from the sugar industry and leftover bagasse at the facilities. We've done the FEL2 packages around each one of them generically. In the future, we could be looking at marginal farmlands into energy crops, such as grasses. We've already tested them. We have not done full engineering packages on them yet. We really see that as a future as we build out. That goes into cellulosic sugars, powder of lignin, nutrients, clean water. Downstream, we can produce everything that a barrel of oil produces today. We can go into plastics with our sugars, bitumen to be able to replace tar in road building and construction, in buildings themselves, being able to replace particle board and so forth, because bitumen is probably the strongest bonding element out there in this planet. It's basically what holds an oak tree up. So even the car industry is looking to be able to replace powdered metallurgy with a lighter renewable source, such as what would come from our process. And we're in discussions with General Motors and Ford and others around that for future supplies. You can see the list there, going into polymers, carbon fiber for car bodies, and cosmetics, everything that's produced by oil today. So.
And Tom, before we get off this slide and before we get into some very intelligent questions that are being asked, can you just give one example? There's a chicken and egg problem here in terms of building these facilities so then the users of these sugars can do things on a mass scale. Can you give the example, for example, of the Oreo cookies? Because that kind of shows that you need to scale up for the large companies like Mondelez and so on to have this available to them for them to change their processes.
Yeah, you're crossing a little bit of NDAs there with the mention of Mondelez, but we're working with a lot of.
I take it back, and this is not being recorded.
but we are working with a lot of snack food companies. The C5 sugars actually you can produce a xylitol. Xylitol is basically a food-based sugar that your body does not store. So all the snack food industries are looking for large sources of this. For instance, some of these, we can provide enough C5 sugars instead of producing fuel ethanol from our C6 sugars. C5 sugars is about a third of that biomass. And we can take that into a food product, a new food product, which would be this xylitol for snack food companies to be able to sweeten Oreo cookies, gummy bears, and everything else of the likes, and not creating obesity by eating them. And so that's very important. And we have been working with several snack food companies on that, and but they need these large supplies first before they can change manufacturing systems. That's where the chicken and egg comes in. No one's going to commit. It takes multiple years to be able to commit and change manufacturing systems within these companies, and to be able to utilize different sugar sources, even though that's their mission and goal, is to be able to produce snack foods and other foods at a rate that won't increase sugar diabetes and obesity as you eat them.
So the first and lowest hanging fruit, and I just want to emphasize this because it goes to a lot of questions I've seen, the lowest hanging fruit is provided as the lowest, or one of the lowest carbon fuels for the transportation industry. That's the immediate market, but that's not where this stops. So let me, Tom, thank you very much for that presentation. I wanted to ask you, I've seen a couple of questions that really go to the crux of this matter. Is this a viable technology that is profitable and can be scaled and so on? Because as we all know, there's this holy grail of turning waste into, whether it's fuel products or electricity or whatever. That's one of the holy grails of the environmental movement and for all of us. But in the past, many of these facilities and technologies have not been market driven, have not been economically viable. And one example of that is that the first generation of ethanol facilities, which for me never made much sense because you're turning food into fuel. That doesn't make sense. So now we're taking waste products, corn straw, for example, and turning it into fuel. So that does make sense. But can you contrast this technology versus the first generation of ethanol plants, which were, many of them were neither profitable nor made environmental sense? So we have to clearly contrast this transformational technology in the sense that, you know, electric cars weren't viable before Tesla, and now they are. So this is a whole transformation. It's not the same thing.
Sure. First of all, I'll take just a couple seconds to defend green ethanol, because I've worked, dedicated myself to that and worked with George W. Bush putting in the policies that we have today to be able to go to a renewable source. And it was the first time we had renewable energy ever mentioned within a energy policy here in the U.S. as George W. Bush put in after 9/11 to wean us off of oil. And so grain ethanol actually was a very good fit, and it does reduce the carbon, it reduces particulate matter going out into the atmosphere and into our waterways, and adds oxygen. It's the cheapest way to add oxygen and oxygenate our gasoline. And so high-powered engines need that. We've gone to cheaper engines that need less oxygen and don't have the power and strength as they once did. And they also produce a high protein feed at the end of grain ethanol called distillers grains, and that still goes out to the food markets or the livestock. What we do, and where grain ethanol got in trouble, is that they're always trapped between two commodities. They have the molecule, the ethanol, the fuel ethanol, which is a commodity. It basically goes up and down with the price of gasoline, even though it goes more moderately. It's more rounded than spiked like gasoline is. And at the same time, you have corn, which is a commodity. So you're always eking out your profit margins with between those two commodities. That would never happen to us. All our biomass is locally sourced. In Mason City site, the reason we chose that for our first site, we can, just with a 12% participation rate around a 50-mile radius of our facility, we can bring in all the corn stover we need to feed our facilities. That's huge. And so you maintain that with long-term contracts with the farmers and pay them well back for that biomass supply. And so we have a very stable revenue stream. You still see the little bit of fluctuation within the ethanol pricing, within some of the carbon pricing. Carbon pricing continues to rise, and that's really adds our stabilizing force. We also have a revenue that comes in as a RINs price. That's a blender's credit to our biomass, which is required by law for them to blend. And that'll continue. In fact, in Europe right now, they're going to a 10% blend, and all their biomass is coming from Brazil. At the moment, Brazil, because of the political chaos down there, is not expanding that market, and we can fulfill that market 100%. And we also have contracts to be able to do that in Europe going towards the future of our build out.
Thank you for that. So
one more thing was land use. I had mentioned that before. That really hit the grain ethanol industry hard, and they hit a ceiling on land use. So I just want to point that out as well.
Okay. And one very blunt question is this: if you had none of these economic incentives from the government, would these plants be profitable on their own?
Yeah, we can show you our financial models. We have, nobody sees carbon payments going away. They're only increasing. The RINs pricing, as far as law requiring blenders, that's being, we've had that rocked a little bit during this past administration, but it's not going to go away. They're going to require replacements of those carbons, those fossil carbons, and they're going to fine those type of blenders that aren't blending it. And so that'll continue. And we also see that in European policy now, they have actually, most of these other countries have pushed back on grain ethanol and looking at non-food type of production of this fuel. And so we are probably one of the leaders right now, as I said, to be able to fulfill those market demands.
Okay. And by the way, I see a lot of questions on the various economics. I don't want to get into the minutia of the economic model. We're happy to do that offline when we can go into a great deal on that.
Yeah, we can share those.
Yeah, so we're happy to have offline conversations about what's the cost of ethanol and all those sorts of things. I do want to say, going to some of the questions, that importantly, Ørsted spent hundreds of millions of dollars proving this technology with many different kinds of feedstocks. So wheat straw, corn stover, sugarcane bagasse, etc. So this has been proven across a wide variety of sources, which is one reason we would like to invest in this, because this applies to the United States, to Mexico, to Canada, to Brazil, to Argentina. And of course, these gentlemen can take this globally as well. But many of the largest agricultural producers in the world, 4 of the top 10, I believe, are in the Americas, and there's many others here as well. So that technology and that data is owned now by these gentlemen. So, so if this is a holy grail and it turns waste into valuable commodities and has many different vertical markets that can be attacked, what are the barriers to this? what's holding you back?
Well, actually, it's interesting because all the horrible stuff that COVID has brought to the world, it's actually collapsed the fuel markets, and that's actually very good for us. Because right now we are in the midst of having major discussions for the first time, and this has not happened before, with all the energy companies, the largest energy companies in the world. Just over the past few months have come to those tables, and so everybody is counting carbons now. All the energy companies. I am under NDA with quite a few of them. Some of these conversations can be seen within our data room under NDAs, and I have permission to be able to share those. One of the largest energy companies is going to be announcing that they're going to be 100% renewables going forward as of January 2nd. They have just replaced their whole C-class executives, and being able to make that leap into renewables. It's all going to be about carbons and reductions of carbons, and how we can get to negative carbon savings to be able to undo damage. And the smart energy companies right now are going to be fighting for that leadership role. So, the other barrier, of course, is with New Energy Blue has been that early capital. Not looking to be able to take that early capital from several larger companies because we have a team that's able to execute right now. We can do it well, and executing of these projects is ultimate importance. And we've been working on this for 10 years. We have brought in the originators of this technology. They're sitting in an office in Denmark, and we're able to execute well. We've seen major energy companies buy up technology such as us and have not done so. They have basically executed poorly. And that's really what this team is about. And I can show you our qualifications around that, which you have seen, Paul. So,
yeah. Now, and one of the strange things, I've been in the private equity world for 30 years now. One of the strange things is that there are very large amounts of money that would like to invest in these projects. Yeah. We're talking billions of dollars from, I'm not going to make the mistake of naming any names, but many of the large infrastructure funds and groups. So they're willing to invest, but they're in large projects and in the company, but they're not able to provide this late stage venture capital money, which is kind of odd. And most venture capital funds are focused on things like cloud computing and social and things of that sort. So that is a niche that our fund hopes to be able to fill. And right. That is exactly the kind of capital that's needed here. It's to get these first projects to permit ready, shovel ready. And then there are billions of dollars of debt and equity available to develop the actual projects. So it's a very strange world where you can get very large amounts of money, but you can't get smaller amounts of money of $15 to $20 million.
Well, a lot of the smaller LPs really don't fit within this arena, and that's why we are working with a large equity fund right now. They've given us a letter to fund 3 of our projects, and it's a $3.7 billion equity firm, and but they want to come in on the project side. Right now, we have some spend around, most of it's around engineering to complete our engineering packages that we can roll out and complete our first project here in the U.S., but also with the multiple sites that we can share with any audience, where biomass is plentiful and we have direct rail to major markets. So.
Right. So again, a lot of questions here about comparing and contrasting the first generation versus the second generation. So the first generation of your feedstock can be expensive and volatile. Well, here your feedstock, which is agricultural residue, can be contracted for 15 or 20 years. It's a plus for the farmers. It's just a new source of income for the farmers. And then tell us about your output. So it's easy to get the feedstock in this particular case compared to first generation. What are the markets for this? And do address again some of the tertiary and secondary markets other than biofuels, but who are the off-takers of this ethanol?
Well, we have a couple marketers right now. Murex is one of our major marketers. They will give us a take or pay contract. They can include floor prices if needed. I put together a lot of these contracts with the grain ethanol industry down through my life. I even worked with the first grain ethanol company to go public back pre-2008. And being able to fulfill these markets, California market right now, it takes 70 of our plants just to fulfill the current demand. Grain ethanol is filling that right now. They want to replace those grain ethanol gallons with cellulosic gallons over time. And our mission right now is to build 5 of these over the next 5 years. And we can share our goals and estimates and what that looks financially back. But being able to grow a company from where we're at today with our values to a billion-dollar company, and you look at us and say, well, you guys are limb and trim as a company to be able to do this. We've learned a lot in the grain ethanol industry. You don't have to build a big company. You have offices at the sites, at the construction sites, and you have offices. We have engineers that are sitting on the sidelines. We've had 900 engineers going at one time with Delta T Corporation, in which I worked and helped grow as a company, to be able to build out the first generation. And so as long as you have your core engineers controlling that build out, you can meet these market demands. And so Canada has another 70 facilities to feed that market within the Midwest and other markets here. It would take 500 facilities to be able to meet all of that. We're going to see some cut with electric vehicle growth. And that's very, very good, because it's going to need to take everything to really make a dent over the next 50 years. Unfortunately, I'll be dead before I get to see the results of all that, but my grandchildren will not. So.
Okay, well, that's very important, because again, we've emphasized that this is fully profitable without these incentives, but that these incentives are expanding. They're expanding in Europe, they're expanding in Canada and other states in the United States. So since we're in the political season, and since part of the government's role is to set the guardrails for where the economy goes, how do you see working with this new administration and where they're going with clean fuels and sustainability?
Well, it's going to be a new department focused on this. It's going to drive a lot of the other departments. As I said, we had an EPA that was not real functional. I try not to get too much on the political side, especially as I've talked to investors, but it was driven from top down. There are a lot of smart people in Washington. Washington has some of the brightest people in the world, and they have not been working at full capacity, and including the EPA. The EPA, if Mary Nichols does come in, I worked with her on the California Air Resource Board. They know a lot about our technology, and they also see the opportunity to be able to look at a transportation sector and to go carbon negative with the entire transportation sector with a plan and policy can support. That's huge. You cannot do that with electric. You can get kind of around a carbon neutral, but we got a lot of power to be able to build without blackouts in this country. And so Mary Nichols understands that a lot, and so that's huge. We have good USDA. We're looking at additional grants to go into these projects. The past 4 years, it was all focused on R&D. We didn't need R&D. We had Orsted that provided all the capital we needed to get to this place, so we weren't going after grants. But commercial grants, of course, that'll replace the equity into some of these projects. And we have loan guarantees from the state of Denmark, from the EKF fund, and a good, strong relationship with them to be able to export this technology and into the Americas. So.
Okay. I want to emphasize again that one of the things that I like about many of the projects that people like Tony Saxton and his group and others are pursuing is that it's not just about conservation. It's about creating jobs and improving communities, adding value to communities. This kind of holistic approach to these investments. Can you talk again about the benefits to the farm economy? And you threw out a statistic, which I'm not sure I heard correctly, but that if normally an acre of land would produce X for a farmer,
right,
this multiplies the returns that they get on that acre of land, creating income for them, jobs, another source of income. So can you emphasize the benefits to the farming communities?
Yeah. Well, grain ethanol basically made an impact to the farmers. It brought additional income, a stabilizing cost to their corn when a grain ethanol plant within their area to being able to bring in that grain to that actual facility. So yeah, it increased about 20 cents per bushel, and that was very strong for farmers, especially as food prices remain stable and profitability on food, it was not as great. So it really saved a lot of farmers, and God bless the grain ethanol for doing that. On the biomass side, it's producing additional income from those same acreage. So while they're able to see that revenue coming in from the grain ethanol side, this is all new money, taking off 50% of that biomass from that field. Also, with the new administration, they're looking to be able to put a price tag on sequestering carbons within those soils. That'll be additional revenue back to the farmer. They're able to sequester more of that by going into new farming practices, such as no-till farming. No-till farming requires you take off a certain portion of that residue instead of just turning it under, because then as next year's crop is being planted, you have seed touching biomass and not soil. You start to get a decrease of crop growth. Just for instance, corn back in the 1970s was about 50 bushels an acre. We're now producing 250 to 300 bushels an acre. Imagine 1 ear corn per corn stalk within that. You got a lot of biomass out there, and it's going to become a major problem, especially if you're sequestering, you're not plowing those fields, you're doing no-till farming, keeping those carbons in the soils, which also increases the health of the soil by not plowing, and able to grow cover crops during the winter, which is also beneficial for runoffs and sequestering those carbons. And so the impact also locally, I can share with you a lot better than I can speak on that, where municipalities have shown major GDP jumps where an ethanol plant is located. A biomass refinery will do the same type of jump, as well as giving back more to farmers and enriching farmers' lives. So.
Yes, and I might add, and we're running out of time here, that I know one of your strategies is to co-locate with first-generation ethanol plants So you can do both. So you already have a brownfield site, you have the first generation ethanol, and then you also have a biomass refinery, increasing efficiencies for everybody and creating additional sources of income for farmers. There's a lot more to discuss, and of course, anybody who would like to have additional information from Tom and regarding NEB, he's available to have those discussions. There are a lot of intelligent questions in the chat, and we can talk offline to provide some additional information. But again, we're running out of time here. But Tom, thank you very much for this informative presentation. You're onto a very large economic and social opportunity, and we hope you have a tremendous amount of success, and we hope to be part of your success.
Thank you very much, and thanks for everybody for putting up with me and listening to our story. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for joining us. You can view more of our series at www.terra.bz/impact.